I've been playing this game for a long time and I've always gravitated towards challenging content. I feel like being challenged is good for the brain, good for the mind, good for the body all around. We don't get a lot of it IRL. They really nerfed that thing. They really need to patch IRL, but they just never seem to do it. So we're looking to get what we don't get in real life in video games, and World of Warcraft delivers it in spades, if you ask me. Most of that content though comes in the form of group building exercises, things like raids and Mythic Plus. You could also say PvP, things that require multiple players interacting with each other. I obviously don't get a lot of socialization IRL, what a surprise. So the game has allowed me to foster strong connections and friendships forged in the fire of this difficulty. And I do think that's what raiding does best. It encourages you to build relationships with people and rise to the top together on each other's backs. But within the last 5 or so years, Blizzard has seemingly taken an interest in making content that can be done solo very challenging. Most famously, you might know about the Mage Tower. In Legion, it was really notable. And now in Shadowlands, it's honestly even better than it was in Legion in terms of how equitable that challenge can be and how interesting the content is. But we're not talking about that today. Today, we are taking a look and discussing the Jailer's Gauntlet, specifically Layer 8. But honestly, the whole thing is obviously very challenging, and I absolutely have to say I am shocked at how good this is. If you followed this channel from the start of Shadowlands, you know I would really be optimistic about Torghast. I even have a playlist with a bunch of Torghast challenges in it. The regular Torghast stuff can still be fine, and I honestly do think Twisting Corridors is still the absolute best way to play it. But this Jailer's Gauntlet is very interesting, and I'm going to tell you why I like it so much, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I find it so challenging and so rewarding at the same time. The thing that I love the most about the Jailer's Gauntlet is that you get a lot of powers. That's definitely the thing I like the most about the Twisting Corridors too. Regular Torghast is almost kind of like just like you doing world content but with a bunch of mobs and stuff in front of you. By the time you finish it, you really don't have that many powers, but what's most notably lacking is the fact that you really didn't get to build your character a certain way. Unfortunately, with the regular Torghast, I often just take whatever seems to be the most numerically powerful thing. A lot of times just stats or just straight damage things, so you never really get to build cool and fun ways to explore your character, and I feel like that is what Torghast should have been able to do best. It faltered on that because they tried to make it challenging and they tried to make it interesting and have a lot of different play styles you can play around. They didn't do a great job tuning it, but what a surprise, this community doesn't actually want challenging content in the game, so when they tied it to kind of a mandatory acquisition of the legendary currency, well, a lot of people weren't too happy and they kind of forced them to change it. So they made massive changes in 9.1. All 3 patches have had massive changes to Torghast already, and ultimately we settle on a very nerfed and uninspired version where it's so fast and so boring that I think it would be more interesting to just not even take any anima powers at this point. That would probably be more challenging and at least a little bit more engaging. But we have a concession here. We have a second version which is not particularly aggressively targeted towards getting currencies. It does give a lot, but you can only get it once per day, it seems like right now. And my God, is this just a better version for the actual building out of your characters. Like I was saying with Twisting Corridors, that's really what it does best, but it takes like 4 hours to do some of these. If it's actually challenging you, it can take well over an hour, maybe 2 hours, but by the end, you will have a very distinct character build. You will have had so many options. A lot of times you'll have over 100 anima powers. Now, of course, probably like 30 of them are completely passive, nothing you can do about it, but there's a good 30 to 50 of them that are probably going to dramatically change your playstyle, might also give you extra talents, use buttons and spells in different ways, and I am desperately in love with this concept. I really wish I had more time and effort to explore it because I feel like I got really lucky with Blood DK, but I bet there's other classes out there that are just as cool, if not even cooler. So if you guys know of really cool Torghast combinations for other classes, please let me know, and I would definitely like to check them out. Unfortunately, the Wowhead information is very outdated. Looks like it hasn't been touched since 9.0. But building your character is the number one thing I like, and that is what the Jailer's Gauntlet offers you, because you basically start with 5 anima powers, and it seems really often that one of those is an epic anima power, and there's usually a lot of synergy to it. I don't know if it's on purpose, you never know what's random and what's on purpose in this game, but it does feel like they did some of this on purpose. And again, I think I got really lucky with Death Knight, Blood Death Knight specifically, because man, is there just a awesome build that I have been absolutely adoring. But we'll come back to that later. Let's talk a little bit about the actual difficulty and why why I find this so rewarding. The Jailer's Gauntlet is actually a lot more like Mythic Plus, and you might be surprised by that, but the thing about Mythic Plus tanking is that oftentimes you have to be very active in terms of what you're targeting, in terms of how you're using your spells, very active in terms of using your CDs well, and dodging avoidable deaths is basically it's the main thing about tanking in 5-mans, where in raids, it's a little bit more static, it's more about positioning, it's more about macro level decisions, but Mythic Plus is really active in that way where, I'm constantly switching targets, I'm gripping one target, stunning, interrupting, AMSing, potentially icebounding a stun, lichborning a fear, that kind of stuff, right? So it's really active at times on Blood DK, and then of course you're also tending to your own health, getting big death strikes. Well, this is the place to do all that. I'm going to tell you right now, if you can't tell by the footage, man, is there a lot of stuff going on. And Layer 8 specifically seems to have it in spades. It's crazy how many mobs you actually fight, and honestly, if you get unlucky, you could be fighting mobs that are just constantly CCing you. Now that is part of why it can be a little bit frustrating, but I made a video on this a long time ago, and I think it's really important that things do frustrate you for them to be accurately difficult. We talked a lot about this in a leveling challenge video I made a long time ago, which at the point I would say that was probably the hardest single solo content thing I've ever done in the game. A naked leveling challenge with a outlaw rogue, a class I frankly didn't know how to play very well, doing a quest where you're mostly killing elites that can absolutely decimate you. You had to play extremely well, and outlaw rogue had a lot of options, and that is exactly how Blood DK feels in the Jailer's Gauntlet specifically. I have so many options. I'm talking about potentially dozens of options at times, but I have to deal with hundreds of mechanics per floor. So many mechanics that it seems almost insurmountable at times, and there is a lot of footage that I pressed the record, stop on, and deleted on because I wiped in here a lot. I have been trying this for the better part of probably a month now. I had started doing it when the patch first came out before the Mythic Plus season opened, and it was really enjoyable at the time, but then I kind of stopped. And now that I came back with a full set of gear and with the 4 set especially, oh man, is there some really fun stuff. But as you can see, there is so many things that you either have to interrupt, somehow dodge in another way, like physically move out of, prevent like, a knockback or some other mechanic that's going to potentially slow you down or maybe even kill you. And it is pretty crazy at times. It's to the point where there is so many health bars on the screen that I really have trouble targeting them. I don't know if there's a better solution for this, but this was part of the challenge. And this is what I'm talking about with the frustration element, because in order for real difficulty to exist, you have to be a little bit challenged to be able to surmount it in the first place. And that was what that naked leveling challenge offered me, because I was not good at Outlaw Rogue, and frankly it seemed numerically way overtuned for what we were trying to accomplish in that challenge. I did not think anything would come up that hard, and it was really tested us. We spent almost, I think it was about 5 hours on that quest before we finally finished it. All we had to do was kill a single mob. It was like a mythic raid fight, but the difference was it wasn't necessarily meant to be done the way we were doing it. So we were playing at a bleeding edge, finding progression and difficulty where there really wasn't supposed to be, and that's kind of the core part of what makes the challenge difficult at times. So I've always said, and I said in that video, that you want to balance, you want a 50% distribution of that type of difficulty and skill-based difficulty, right? Like you don't want to just be able to say like, okay, well, if this interrupt goes off, it one-shots me, but I could interrupt every single one of them, right? You want there to be some kind of 50% split there where this thing is going to one-shot me and I can get every other one. Something like that, not that specifically per se, but something where you have a lot of options to deal with it. And if you play poorly, maybe you could still survive, but realistically, you need to use your entire arsenal and be very creative. And that is absolutely why I love doing this. I've already done it twice now. This is the second time I did Layer 8. I could see myself doing this a lot more. It's just honestly fun. It was the same way for me in the Mage Tower. I just keep doing the Mage Tower over and over again because it's just really fun. And I'm really shocked because soloing content, it doesn't really exist in WoW. There's usually never any content that you can do solo that is actually challenging. Like, yeah, I could solo dungeons, but it's clearly not the same type of difficulty. It's a very long, almost like a test of patience more than a test of skill. But this is really going to challenge your skill. And frankly, it's going to challenge your UI. As I said, I have a lot of trouble actually targeting enemies. It's really difficult. I'm not really sure how anybody would do it. But the other cool thing about this is that I heard this is a lot easier with a group, with more than one person, but maybe even with 5 people. I don't know. I never tried it because, I'm a bit of a loner in this game. And I have to say that I am really glad I did, because I do think the Blood DK is the perfect option for this content. And I'm going to tell you why. Let's talk a little bit about the build. And before I do, if you guys have done this on other classes, especially other tanks, let me know. I'm going to tell you about why I love my build. And I think this is the best possible build in the game for my playstyle, but maybe there's another another one out there. Like, I'm always kind of like on the fence. Like, I'm thinking like, well, Blood DK is great, but there's probably another class I would like if I just tried it, and I never do. A lot of times I just end up being wrong about that. Blood DK does end up being my favorite. But if you guys know of another, especially tank or maybe even healer that can play the same way, let me know. So what we're talking about here mostly is just a single anima power that really unlocks an entire playstyle. And dude, I'll tell you what, if this was a legendary or something, I would put this on. I would never even consider taking it off. It is without question my favorite thing in the video game concept wise, and that is Entropic Pool. Dealing damage with death and decay increases the damage you deal to the target by 2% stacking, and it goes all the way up to 100. Maybe even goes higher, I don't actually know, but that's actually crazy to me because it means that if I can just, no matter how little damage I do in my base kit, if I can keep the mob in death and decay for a long period of time, that mob is going to die. It's a guaranteed chance. And this takes me back to the early days, man, like classic style stuff where you'd be fighting overwhelming odds, but if you could do it in a certain way, like, you know, this mage soloing, but also paladin AoE soloing, these things were really interesting to me because it's like, if I can just survive long enough, things like Ret Aura will kill the mobs. It will kill them for me. I don't actually have to damage them. They will die on their own. All you have to do is survive. And my God, how did we manage to find it 17 years later with Blood Death Knight and Torghast? But that's it, really. That's the whole video right there. Entropic Pool, and everything else you do is just survive at all costs. Now, there's a lot of really cool ways to do really good damage, and this is not meant to be a guide on how to play a Blood DK in any type of Torghast, to be honest, but I think probably a lot of people would just try to focus on damage because a lot of this stuff seems like, well, if I can just kill it a lot faster, it can just be easier, right? Just like all PvE content. But to me, that's just not as fun. I love surviving at all costs. I'd fight something for an hour, you know what I mean? If it just showed that I can guarantee my own survival, I'm very satisfied with that. So really what I like to do is I like to just reset, and that's the other cool part. You can actually just walk out and walk back in and there'll be 3 new powers, but I'm just going to keep resetting until one of the first 5 anima powers is going to be Entropic Pool. It doesn't have to be from the first 3 that are on the ground. The first 2 mobs you kill also drop them, and then there's like a big window before any more mobs even spawn, so you have your time to pick them and figure out what you're doing. But yeah, if one of those 5 is not at least something that I know is going to propel me forward, I'm going to move on. And there's others as well that are really useful. It's called Death Turf. That's another one. You and your minions gain 10% haste while inside your death and decay, and also makes the mobs deal less damage to you now. So that's really good. 10% reduced damage. And you can kind of just keep stacking these. There's actually like 4 or 5 that are for death and decay and different covenants as well. And I have to say, it's definitely the one that I like the most. Of course, Night Fae, huge fan of it, but just being able to see tons of value every time I drop a D&D down, watching the mobs basically melt every time I put it down, becoming way weaker, I absolutely adore it. And it creates this ultimate tank playstyle where now if I can just guarantee my survival, this pack will die 100%. I have potentially, sometimes 6, 12 elites attacking me, multiple mobs trying to fear me, multiple mobs trying to knock me back, multiple mobs trying to put debuffs on me, but all I need to do is find ways around that, and Death Turf and Entropic Pool will carry me to the finish line. Those mobs will eventually die, and all I have to do is just heal myself and keep myself alive. So on top of this, you're also looking for things that could help you with that. One of the best skills in this is going to be Lichborn, just simply because it helps you not get feared, and there is a lot of mobs casting. But of course, you also have the really famous combo where every time you interrupt, it gives you Icebound, and every time you Icebound, you get the Frozen Dragon thing. That's a really powerful one for AoE as well. And then you could take even further talents into that, where you actually get lower cooldown of interrupt to the point where you just like basically chain interrupting everything. That would be a really high skill play to make, but honestly, there's just sometimes too many mobs for me to actually interrupt. You'll probably see it in the footage at times where it's just literally I target something that I don't even mean to because there's just like 40 mobs on my screen. So really a lot of times I'm just sitting there, tunnel one mob, maybe get some interrupts on it, but just make sure I have the anima power that gives me more access to Lichborn, have AMS up as much as I can. Perhaps the 4 horsemen could also help you by taunting and stuff like that, and just trying to defer as much of that danger away from my character as possible. And this is why it's so difficult, because it actually gets easier as you go, and the beginning is like this massive hill that you have to scrap by. If you can get by those first 2 floors, you're probably golden. By then you'll have a very solid build, you'll have a lot of anima powers, and things just kind of get exponentially better for Blood DK, because once you reach a certain health threshold, it's going to be really hard for you to die, even if you do end up getting stunned or feared. A lot of times that happens to me, I just survive anyway, but it takes a while to get into that, and once you do, you'll know where you're at, but man, do you have to scrap to get by. But it's not all done, because at that point there's still 1,000 mobs attacking you, but it gets to be so exponential at times where you just have have all these different defensive traits, things like reducing damage, you know, stunning mobs, making them feared and interrupting them a lot, just kind of by accident. You could also get the ones that there's literally an immune to stun one. I'm pretty sure there's an immune to fear one as well. A lot of those things are just not something you can get early, but when you get them later on, it really helps and it just kind of solidifies the run for you. So I don't know. I don't really love how easy it gets once you get this build. Usually by like layer 3 or floor 3 or whatever, you're completely kitted out, and then you're kind of just, well, don't do something really dumb like get knocked off the platform or maybe get stunned into mechanics. I've definitely still died. Really, just getting stunned into those like kind of aerial mechanics that fall from the sky is usually the hardest thing about it. But really, it's just about managing what mobs you're looking at. And I'm sure players are a lot better at this than me because I don't really have that kind of a functional brain like that. Like, honestly, it's really hard for me to actually see all the things on my screen at any given time. I'm kind of in just a permanent state of panic when there's this many mechanics going on. So it's just about good reaction times and good preparation, and I absolutely adore that because of this. So I don't know if you guys have ever tried it. If you have, let me know, especially if you're big into Mythic Plus, because to be honest, dude, I could see myself doing this. This is easily just as fun as Mythic Plus. It's not as varied, and you know, there's a lot less kind of skill based in stuff. There's not really a lot that you can improve on. You kind of just have to get the right anima powers, but I like that, the fact that you could reset it and your dedication towards the anima powers can really pay off. But I think this is just as fun and potentially just as difficult and just as rewarding as well as any type of content I've ever done, Mythic Plus included. And you know, I'm sad to see it. I think a lot of people just wrote off Torghast. You know, unfortunately, it took them pretty much the whole expansion to get this version of it. This is what I would consider the best version of it. Twisting Corridors can be really fun, but it just gets really easy as a Blood DK once you get a few powers in as well. So I'm sold, man. I'll tell you what, I can do this on any character. If you guys know of any characters that you think I would like as well, something that really focuses on being ultra tanky and then like kind of just passive damage, because that's another thing. You know, a lot of the Death Knight powers are just passive damage, like that Ancient Drake Breath. You know, you're interrupting, it's giving you damage, it's stunning them all, but it's also something that you're just doing on it. You got to interrupt, right? Like you have to interrupt these spells. You have to use Icebound at times. Same thing with Lichborn, the thing that radiates the death coils and then they res them as ghouls. Death Gripping to summon ghouls. These things are all really powerful offensively, but they're just things that you need to do as a Death Knight. So it's almost just completely passive. I basically have like 4 or 5 different incredibly powerful damage tools that are simply just something I would be doing while tanking. So if you guys know of another class or any type of spec that offers something like that, please let me know. I might check it out. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I really do encourage you guys to check out more of the game. I think a lot of people sit there and do the exact same content forever. You know, you might only raid, you might only Mythic Plus, maybe you only PvP. And then, you know, I see these comments a lot where it's like, I raid on 8 tunes and I raid 25 hours a week. And it's like, is that healthy? Like, do you really feel like that's sustainable long term? I guess if you know what you love, then you got it. You got what you want out of that. But to me, I really like to see a lot of different things in the game, explore my character in different creative ways, find different challenges out there. And this one has offered it, certainly. So thank you for watching. We will see you guys in the next video.